Greetings and welcome to In Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. World Soil Day is observed on December 5, and this year's theme is Soils, where food begins. And we look forward to an expansive conversation with different angles from artist, musician, creative soul Marge Blackman and senior lecturer of soil science at the University of the West Indies, Dr. Gaius Eudoxie. And we want to welcome both of you to the conversation. I want to start with you, please, Ms. Blackman, and we will go into your background in just a bit. But list some of those steps that led to you performing Touch the Ground with Marshall Montano in India. Thank you.
Wow. Well, first of all, greetings, Trinidad and Tobago. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Well, I started working on my album, which is yet to be released in August next year. I started working in 2021. And while I was working on the album, I started a beautiful garden in my backyard. And just for the first time I had in my life, I had a personal connection with just, growing simple crops on my own. And it was so, it started to go to such levels of depth. And during that process, I wrote a song called Dear Earth, which is released, but it's going to be on my upcoming album. And I sent it to Marshall and his team because I just felt this is needed to be heard. And they listened to this song. It's a beautiful track. And they just, from that introductory of where my energy was in terms of the connection with the earth, they felt it, they gave me the beautiful honor and opportunity to be on this amazing project with Honorable Sadhguru and Marshall.
And I want to talk about that connection and that energy in just a bit. But Dr. Eudoxie, let me bring you into the conversation, please. What is the most crucial bit of information that you would want someone to know about soil and nutrition?
A pleasant good day to all the viewers. And it's indeed a pleasure being here. When it comes to soils, I think more importantly is just our knowledge of soils. And I think that is what really is lacking. We don't respect it. We don't see it. Most times it's under our feet. So we don't pay attention to it. So I think the most important thing is just the knowledge, the public education surrounding soils and understanding that it's just an important resource as the air that we breathe, as the biodiversity that we need, the trees that provide us oxygen, as well as the water that is our life. It is the one resource that connects all of those other resources. And it is something that is hidden, and I'm happy that we're getting the opportunity to put it out there now to the public and recognize its importance.
And in terms of putting it out there, I'm going to fasten all your business a little bit now, Ms. Blackman. No, I will ask Dr. Eudoxie in a little bit, and I don't know his history with soil, but what are some of those lessons that you now know, and that they're directly responsible from growing up on the Blackman Ranch in Piparo?
Oh, wow. There's so much. After last week, I was reflecting on how, whether it was conscious or unconscious, but done by my father, the environment itself, it opens you up to such a, not just health-wise, but spiritually as well. Nature, we are so connected. And looking back as to where we come from, as to where I am now, I mean, living in the city, I can tell the difference. Now that I'm conscious of it, I can tell the difference to the environment and what it did to me as an individual, opening me up to so many things. But and we are, as individuals, so connected in many ways to nature. A simple thing as what we put in our body on a daily basis open up our consciousness to so many levels and so many things. So for me, when I look back, I realize, whether I was aware of it or not, I've learned so much and I've been open to so much because of my upbringing and because of my environment, and which literally made me who I am today. Yeah, without a doubt.
And I thank you for that. And that's why I asked the question, what do you now know that you know now because of that experience?
Yeah.
But Dr. Eudoxie, If I hear somebody is into geography or geology, many times they're going into oil, they're going into, there are people in volcanology, but you don't just fall into being a lecturer of soil science. So what are some of those steps? How did this take place? Take me through that, thank you.
Oh, that's a wonderful journey that I had as well. I came from a farming family as well. So I'm originally St. Lucian. So I worked on a banana farm with my grandfather. So I grew up in agriculture as well. Never had a true love for it until I did go to a career fair. And at that career fair, interestingly enough, they had a gentleman from the Ministry of Agriculture, and he was a soil scientist. And that was the first time I heard. I couldn't even believe people used to study dirt. So it was a very interesting thing for me that you actually had a science where you could understand what is happening within our soil. And that took me on a journey to better appreciate agriculture. And I went on to do my BSc in agriculture, and through that specialized in actually soil science, particularly in what we call soil management. So it is something very ad hoc. It's not something that our typical students from secondary school would be exposed to unless you really are doing agriculture or geography. But it is something that we are getting more and more persons interested in, especially now that they recognize the connection of our soils to particularly what the theme of this year World Soils Day is, which is the connection to nutrition. And now that we recognize that there is that connection, and that connection happens not only in the physical form, but as well in that spiritual, social form, it is something that we are seeing is now encouraging more persons into our science.
Yes. Yeah.
And I see you nodding. I hear you saying, yeah, what resonates about what it is you just heard from Dr. Eudoxie, Ms. Blackman?
I mean, I think it is almost what I just said just now. It's very similar to the deeper we dive into this, we understand, as I said, the connection we have. And for me, I could only speak from my experience that we are created from a source. And I think as technology and the world become more drive into that vein of technology, we move further away from our original source, which we call Mother Earth. And we can have many names for it, but it is such a deep connection to who we are. And it's where we're going to go back to, no matter how modern we become as a nation and as a world, we go right back to the earth. So obviously we are also from Mother Earth. So if we are so connected, then why not? Why are we drifting further and further away from our deepest connection? That, so just hearing it from all different perspectives, I think we all just have to come back to that same understanding. And the more we become conscious of it, I think the better world we would become.
And that is part of the reason I'm grateful to be having this conversation with both of you at this time, because sometimes you hear it from two people, but one resonates, or you understand it from one person a little more. But we continue trying to make that connection. When we return, we are speaking about World Soil Day. We're doing so with Marge Blackman as well as Dr. Gaius Eudoxie. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. We are speaking with Marge Blackman as well as Dr. Gaius Eudoxie. We're doing so on the occasion of World Soil Day. And Marge, just now we're going to have a plug-in because we were able to go to the ranch and see some of the things that were happening, and this is even before the pandemic. So we'll ask you to give us a little listing on that. But even before that, Dr. Eudoxie, not everybody gets to go to school to study dirt. So with that in mind, what are some of those threats to soil that we should be aware of?
Oh, and that is particularly concerning to us, to me as well as it should be to us. Particularly one of the things we want to note, within our circumstance, we are part of what we call small island developing states. So one of the things that are really important for us to recognize is that our land space is limited. It's small. So we don't have a lot of soil to go around. And because soil is such a critical component of our ecosystem, we have to be very mindful of it, and not to compound that with obviously all the issues of climate change. But the essence is that there are a number of things that threaten our soil. most importantly, I guess for us here in the region, and particularly for us here in Trinidad, is inappropriate land use. And we see that all the time. You know, I listen to the news, and what came out, particularly for me as a soil scientist, listening to what is happening to us with regards to flooding. Not only is that we're getting flooded, but we're also recognizing it's interfering with our waters. And what is interfering with our waters is because the waters are now silted. And the waters are silted because that's erosion that is happening from our land. So that physical degradation is by far one of the most critical things for us to pay attention to. You know, we did assessments in Trinidad. We know that over almost 60% of our lands are classified as, you know, highly degraded. And it is something that we have to recognize because, you know, we don't have any other land that is going to be there for us, you know, when that land is at a point where it's not producing as much. You talk to farmers, farmers will easily tell you, you know, the land is not producing as it was 20 years ago. And it is because that land over time has been degrading. So that is by far the major threat that we have that we need to pay attention to and address. And if we don't address it, we will find ourselves on a threshold that we will not want to be on.
So what are some of those things that we're able to do? Because sometimes it feels as though, and you spoke to this, Ms. Blackman, in terms of the further we go from what it is we used to or who we used to be, it seems as though even though we may make some gains, in the final analysis is not worth it. You hear King Austin saying the price of progress is high. Is it that we need crop rotation? Is it that we need different methods of farming? Some of the things that would have been done traditionally or intuitively, even though we can't hold everything. But what are some of those things that we can do, Dr. Eudoxie?
Well, I will start off by saying probably one of the most critical things that we can do is social change. We need mental change. We need a cultural adjustment. We need to recognize that we are users of that resource. Now, that resource is most times confused with the resource, which is land. You know, while land we can own, soil is supposed to be a resource for everybody. And I think that is where Marge was getting into, recognizing that Mother Earth is ours. So it belongs to all of us. And we have to have a collective in terms of how we deal with it. So I think one of the things we have to appreciate is that if we don't change our mentality to how we treat with the soils, then I don't think all of our physical interventions are meaningful. But I will indicate two other critical areas that require adjustments. Within Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean, there is not one country that has taken a position to determine how they want to treat the soil. So not one of our countries have a policy that says, okay, you know, this is a resource we need to protect, and this is how we're going to treat it, and this is going to be the guidelines as to how persons who use that resource going to work to guarantee that the resource remains sustainable. Outside of that, I mean, there are what we call sustainable soil management practices. Globally, those management practices have already been tried and tested, and we know if we implement them across our various different types of land uses that are degrading, we will see some level of change. So there is a multi-pronged approach that is required for us to get that progress that comes from different elements. And I think if we pay attention to that integrated approach, we will be able to see some amount of what we call restoration, you know, happening over a meaningful period.
And that integrated approach starting from the mental position where we are at. And no, I haven't been there for a friendship festival, Marge, but I can say I had a Dear Diary moment that I was able to have a piece of sugar cane and drink a coconut from the Blackman Ranch. So what are some of the things that are taking place that you're excited about with regard to work in soil that is happening in that space?
Oh my, a lot. This is more Sheldon and Isaac area, but in what he told me about Isaac recently is that they were getting into avocados, which is I am looking forward to it. And Trinidad and Tobago, I think, we need a lot more farmers who's diving into these kind of things. Also, they're looking to get into what we call fishery, where they're raising things like tilapia and just I think they're going back to the ancient way where I think it was the natives where they had a type of agriculture where they followed the three sisters, where they plant plants that is relative to each other, that go help each other grow in different ways. And so they're looking into more the type of organic type of farming to not just grow their fruit organically, but also to help the soil while doing it. And I think that's really important to keep that in mind. I think that's in a major way. That's where we have strayed a lot as farmers in Trinidad and Tobago and in the world as well.
And it's interesting that sometimes the more you see things turn, we go back to things, but there's a different name for it. Like you're talking about those traditional intuitive ways and using the three sisters, and you hear other people talking about syntropic farming, where you have, and so like even like Corpus Christi time, you stick your blade in the earth, rock it to the side, you put some pigeon peas and some corn, so that the pigeon peas is a nitrogen fixer, and the corn just gobbling up that nitrogen, so they grow together. I see Dr. Eudoxie nodding his head, so I think on the right track. But in terms of the work that you're doing, not necessarily on the farm, but you said you're a city girl now, and you are doing things on your own. Is it a matter of space? How are you doing some of those things? Because I think sometimes people say, well, I don't have the space to grow anything. What are some of the things that are working for you that you'd want to share? Thank you.
Of course, that's why I spoke about earlier on about just finding that little spot. I mean, to me, there's a saying called where there's a will, there's a way. So once you're willing to, once you realize and you're conscious of this connection, you will find a way. You could even grow a garden in a pot if you want to. So where I am, thankfully, there's a little spot of land in my backyard. So I utilize it as much as I can and really just stay connected. And other than that, I look at the land, and everyone should, I'm starting to, I should say, as my own body. And when you start to become very conscious of what you put into your body, what heals your body, what makes you even more connected, as I said, spiritually, you will approach the land the same way, because it is so connected. We are almost the same. So if you are conscious of of what you put in your body on a daily basis, I think naturally, like a ripple effect, you will become even more conscious of how you treat the land. So yeah, this is where I am in my little speck of the world, just being very conscious on a daily basis of what I put in my body and how I treat the land.
I want to thank you for sharing that energy with us, both you, Marge Blackman, as well as you, Dr. Gaius Eudoxie. And we are doing this looking at World Soil Day, but also beyond, because we've been told that we are just curators of this space and we leave it to others. So the question is, what condition are we going to do that in? But on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.